Hi everyone, and welcome to this special edition video on Beam Confidential DeFi Infrastructure. In this video, our goal is to present a coherent picture of what Beam can offer in this space, explain why we think this offer is unique, and why we have decided to invest our time and effort to build it during this year. Some of the things that we will discuss you might have already heard mentioned before, such as Lilantos, confidential assets, and bridges, and you will also hear familiar terms such as DeFi, sidechains, and stablecoins. However, what we would like to achieve is for you to see a clear picture of where we're going and what we're trying to build, and to understand exactly how all these building blocks fall in place to create a complete solution. Right from the start, I would like to warn you that this is going to be a relatively long video, not just because there is a lot of technical material to cover, but also because all these things are very major parts of our development effort this year, and we're going to talk a lot about exactly what we're building and how. The video will be roughly divided into two parts. In the first one, we will discuss the infrastructure that we're building, including confidential assets, scripted scripts, and more. And in the second part, we're going to discuss the applications that will be enabled by this infrastructure. Before we get started, I would like to say a few words on why exactly we have decided to move in this direction. From the very beginning, Beam was extremely focused on practicality. This was one of the reasons why we have chosen to use Mimblewimble, since it elegantly solves the problems of both confidentiality and scalability to essential aspects of any practical financial application that are notoriously difficult to combine in the blockchain space. It's also why we have invested a lot of time and effort into creating beautiful and usable wallets for all platforms, and we have also provided APIs and many integration objects to make working with Beam as simple and practical as possible. Beam has also shown that we understand decentralization, both technologically by providing features like atomic swaps, which allow exchanging Beam for Bitcoin, Litecoin, or Quantum without any trusted third party, and also organizationally by moving to Beam Foundation that governs the project moving on. Beam has also shown that we can implement cryptographically complex features such as Laser Beam, Lilantos Mimblewimble, Fly Client, and many more. And we can build them fast. 9 months from scratch to mainnet release, and then over 60 releases through the year. And so, as we were planning our roadmap for 2020, it seemed only natural to expand Beam towards the direction of financial application infrastructure. And so now let's review our building blocks and see how they all fit together. Let's start first with the concept of confidential assets. The ability to create new asset types exists in several blockchains, and I think the most popular example is ERC20 tokens on Ethereum, where it is implemented using smart contracts. Another example of asset issuance would be Liquid, which is a federated Bitcoin sidechain, which also supports confidential assets. Beam, of course, is a public permissionless blockchain, which does not support smart contracts, and we will talk about what that means for us in terms of creating DeFi applications later in this video. So in Beam, confidential assets are implemented in layer 1 inside the Beam node and are hence first-class citizen, equal in all properties to the Beam itself. What this means in practice is that confidential assets are confidential by default and also preserve the Mimblewimble scalability properties, namely the cut-through that allows us to discard spent UTXOs and thus optimize the blockchain size. In Mimblewimble, new types of assets are created by modifying the existing UTXO model and changing the generators, such as each new generator creates a new asset type. Operationally, this means having 4 new types of transactions. The first transaction allows to register a new asset type, an operation which requires locking some amount of Beam, let's say 1,000. Then you can use issuing transaction to issue some amount of assets, and you can use several such transactions so that you reissue the same type of transactions multiple times, each time with some new amount. Then, of course, the reverse transaction, the one that burns some amount of assets, and the fourth transaction that allows to destroy the asset type completely and free the locked beams that are refunded to the issuer. Of course, all of these operations are only available to the issuer of the asset type. Once the asset was created, it can be used in regular trading by all wallets of the Beam wallet family, and it will be natively supported, and all the operations that can be currently performed on Beam will be also allowed on assets as well. So you can basically list the asset on an exchange or use them to in all the types of transactions that we support today. Moving on to another essential building block, Lilantos Mimblewimble. Lilantos is a new protocol for confidential transfer of value developed by cryptographer Aram Zhivanian for Zcoin cryptocurrency. It is a completely independent protocol in its own right. However, Beam has modified it a little to be used as an extension to the Mimblewimble protocol. At the basis of Lilantos is a shielded pool that can receive a set of UTXOs and emit a completely new UTXO with the same amount but unlinked from all the previous history. In Beam, Lilantos is used for three different purposes. First of all, of course, it solves the linkability issues by being able to unlink UTXOs. It will also allow us to implement non-interactive payments that does not require interaction with the other wallet to create a transaction, unlike the regular Mimblewimble transactions that do. But also what we're doing is using the Lilantos technology to hide the type of confidential assets. So whenever you create a transaction with confidential asset, not only the amount and of course the address of the sender or receiver are not shown on the blockchain, but the type itself is also not detectable, and it is impossible to distinguish one UTXO from another, and thus it completely hides the type of the asset being traded. The last concept I would like to discuss in this section is scriptless scripts, and it is often misunderstood, especially when compared to the more popular concepts such as smart contracts. The reason for that, I think, is partially due to the confusing naming, since scriptless script is not exactly a script in the regular sense of the word, but rather it's a collection of cryptographic primitives and building blocks that can be invoked and used to verify the results of a computation that are performed off-chain. Unlike smart contracts, in which all the nodes run the same computation using the same code on the same data from the blockchain, and then use the consensus layer to agree on the results, in scriptless script, the wallets perform the operations and the computations off-chain, and then send just the result to the node so it can verify and agree that this result is actually correct. For example, both atomic swaps and the laser beam implementations can be seen as examples of scriptless scripts. But however, we can also develop more complex ideas, such as, for example, CDPs, collateralized debt positions, which are used as the basis of the DAI cryptocurrency, which is an algorithmic stable coin. So these concepts can also be implemented in the future using ideas from scriptless scripts. These were the three essential building blocks that we would need. But however, to allow building practical applications using Beam, it is also necessary to provide more flexibility to the Beam wallet infrastructure. And this is why, alongside the development of the node, we also work on a new and more modularized architecture for the Beam wallet. And the idea here is to decouple the wallet functionality to enable new types of clients such as web wallet, hardware wallets, and eventually, hopefully, simplify the third-party wallet integrations, and also to provide more flexibility to application builders to be able to utilize all this structure and create interesting and flexible applications. And that brings us to the point which our product manager would probably have told me to start with, namely, which applications will be made possible using our new infrastructure components. We will start with bridges, specifically Ethereum to Beam. Even though confidential asset infrastructure allows you to easily create new types of assets, it is much more practical to think about using existing assets, specifically tokens on Ethereum in our case, and especially stablecoins, being able to move them to Beam blockchain, trade them confidentially, and then move them back. And this is exactly the point of bridges. In the initial implementation, bridge will be centralized, trusted component that will combine some smart contracts on Ethereum and a web service that will control the emission and burning of assets on Beam chain. And the process will look like this. The user will lock some coins in the Ethereum contract and in return receive newly emitted amount of same asset represented on Beam chain. Then this asset can be traded confidentially and eventually moved back to the bridge where it will burn and then unlocked and returned to the user on the Ethereum chain. In the first version, this functionality will be supported in the Beam web wallet, and it will be a seamless process that will allow to move assets from some existing Ethereum wallets such as MetaMask to Beam and back. Another possible use of bridges is to create sidechains. Since not all the functionality can be implemented on the Beam mainnet, it can be useful to have sidechains that support additional types of functionalities such as smart contracts or anything else, and then be able to move assets seamlessly from Beam mainnet to the sidechain and back, and thus allow additional types of functionality to work with Beam coins or any assets created on top of the Beam chain. From the user perspective, in this case, the process will work in a very similar way. And in theory, in the future, we will also be able to support completely trustless sidechains. However, it's much more difficult to implement, and hence we will probably only work on that towards the end of the year. Now let's talk a bit about additional types of DeFi applications that will be enabled using this Beam confidential asset in DeFi infrastructure. Even without the smart contracts, the combination of confidential asset infrastructure and the scripted scripts allow creation of a wide variety of DeFi applications such as lending, synthetic assets, tokenization, or utility tokens of any kind. Basically, the application builders will be given a set of APIs to create and manipulate assets, perform financial operations, and then being able to verify them on chain, and thus use Beam for confidential trading of almost any kind of token, whether it's wrapped, moved through a bridge, or created from scratch on the Beam blockchain. As we have seen, the proposed solution offers a wide variety of options for building confidential financial applications on top of the Beam blockchain. We believe that combined with Beam's signature usability and the proven delivery capabilities, this puts us in a unique position in the market and makes us attractive for both developers and investors. And so, to sum things up, this year Beam is going to build an infrastructure for confidential DeFi applications that will include support for confidential assets, integrated Lilantos Mimble-Wimble protocol, scriptless scripts, and a new wallet architecture that will make the integration with applications and developers easier and allow them to create a new class of confidential DeFi applications. Among the first types of applications that will be supported on Beam platform will be bridges, confidential stablecoins either created from scratch or moved from a different chain, sidechains, and various kinds of DeFi applications, including lending, synthetic assets, and many more. Thank you all for watching the special edition video on Beam Confidential DeFi Infrastructure. Please subscribe to our channel, join our communities, ask questions, communicate with us. Thank you very much for supporting Beam, and have a great day.